Hello and welcome to the Unnamed Automotive Podcast. My name is Sami Haj Assad, and with me, as always, is my good friend and fellow automotive journalist, Benjamin Hunting. Say hi to the people, Ben.
Greetings, human listeners.
And greetings to everyone. If this is the first time you're listening to our podcast, thank you for trying something new. I will reiterate, Ben and I are a pair of automotive journalists, but more important than that, we're very good friends. Right, Ben?
Yes.
We're such good friends that we like to let each other plug where you can find all of our work. And I'm going to let Ben do that right now before he lets me do it for myself. Okay, Ben, you're up first.
Sure, you can find my work at Motor Trend, at Capital One, and at Haggerty.
And you can find my work at autotrader.ca, driving.ca, and Electric Autonomy Canada. And that last one is a true website, no matter what Ben tells you.
If somebody shows up at your door with identification saying they're from Electric Autonomy Canada, do not let them in. They do not have a warrant.
It's very likely that's true. Ben, we've got some EVs to talk about this week, which is weird because I think we've shied away from EVs lately. And
shied
now we're
away?
Back. Well, we wouldn't shy away. We more or less just didn't book one for a while.
Yeah, I think the last time I drove something electrified was the Wrangler Rubicon 4xe, and I think that was back in June.
That's barely an EV, let's be clear.
I guess. I mean, it weighs it weighs what an EV weighs.
Oh my God, the car I've got this week weighs way too much.
The car I have this week, I guarantee weighs even more.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, then let's get started. The car I'm driving this week is called the 2024 Acura ZDX or ZDX, depending on what side of the border you're reading its name.
Sami, refresh my memory. The ZDX, it didn't used to be an EV.
No, it used to be based on a coupe SUV based on the Pilot, as far as I understand. Which
kind
is
of based. I mean, based on the Pilot in the sense that they shared a platform.
And I think a powertrain.
Okay. Did they share? Okay.
But it looked a lot like the Honda Accord Cross Tour.
Well, I have to disagree with you. I think it was way more angular than a Cross Tour, right?
Yeah, of course.
It was super strange. When did it come out? 2011, 2010, around there?
It was the harbinger of the Acura shield or beak, right?
Something like that. So everyone likes to talk about the ZDX as being the first of the crossover coupes, but that was actually the X6. The X6 beat everyone to the punch. And then I think a year later, or maybe 6 months later, Acura came out with the ZDX, but the difference between the ZDX and the X6 is the X6 had performance.
Yeah.
And the ZDX was very heavy and had that Pilot drivetrain that Sami was alluding to. I think the ZDX was something like 4,000 pounds, and this is an era where that was still very heavy for a car.
You know what? Maybe it didn't have the Pilot drivetrain. I'm reading that it had a 3.7, which I don't think was in the Pilot.
Okay. Regardless, though, it wasn't impressive in terms of power. I want to say it was under 300?
300 on the dot.
Okay. So, and
on a good day, maybe.
A 300 horsepower, 4,000 pound vehicle is not fast.
No.
I mean,
not at all.
It's not going to embarrass itself. It can get out of its own way. But I think that the combination of very unusual looks, high weight, middling performance, and not great fuel mileage because of all of the above.
Not to mention poor practicality because of its design.
Yeah, it really had that sloping rear end where it not only cut into cargo space, but I think second row headroom.
Yes.
It got to the point where they sold so few of these that seeing one was an event, and it still is. If I see a ZDX, I take a picture of it. I saw a Cross Tour this weekend, if anyone's curious. Actually, it wasn't this weekend, it was Monday. Sami and I, so we have a bit of a thing where if I see a VinFast...
You're going to tell them
yeah.
this thing?
If I see a VinFast, I tell Sami immediately because it's like a four-leaf clover, right? You're not going to see a VinFast.
Do you think listeners know what a VinFast is
I hope not. If you don't go to the VinFast showroom. In any case, I saw two on Monday within about an hour of each other. And then Sami told me if I saw a third one, it would be a jackpot. But yes. I didn't see a third VinFast. I saw a Cross Tour, which is almost as good.
Yeah, no, that doesn't line up. I've seen two VinFasts and a Fisker in one day, and I think that's a jackpot.
That's definitely something. Definitely go see your doctor.
Lately, I've been seeing some Rivians around town, which caught me off guard. I didn't know that they had like a dedicated dealership in our
I don't
province.
think they do.
And then I saw a Cybertruck parked in a mall with California plates. That also caught me off guard.
I saw my third Cybertruck recently, and it was disgusting. And
Those are wild looking cars. They look like totally out of place. The proportions. Their
awful.
Proportions are off. It's
Everything
really
about it is
weird.
awful. And I have a friend who's traveling the U.S. fairly extensively right now, and he's been going to places where people buy Cybertrucks, and most of what he's seeing is wrapped. So he's seen like a rose gold Cybertruck. He's seen a straight up gold Cybertruck. He's seen a purple and pink Cybertruck. I can tell you that it doesn't make it any better.
I'd believe that.
Anything that draws attention to it is kind of a faux pas.
But since we're on the topic of the Cybertruck, why don't we get back to some electric vehicles? As I mentioned, the Acura ZDX and Ben and I were talking about was a 2010 model year vehicle, and I think it only existed for 4 years or 5 years.
And they sold almost none of them. And this is kind of...
none of them.
This is Acura's second revival of a past nameplate in the last 18 months.
You're saying the Integra came first?
Yes, and now we have...
the Integra was not a dismal failure like the ZDX.
No, the Integra is something people remember, and the ZDX is something people try to forget.
Yeah, that's right.
Although, I probably, if I saw one that was affordable, and by affordable I mean like $1,000, I would probably buy it.
Yeah.
Because it's so weird. It is the Subaru Baja of the Acura universe.
Is it not like a Murano Cross Cabriolet?
No, that's like its own thing. Like, Murano is just, that's any convertible SUV, like a modern convertible, and I don't mean like removable roof like a Jeep. I mean like convertible, like the Land Rover Evoque.
Yes.
Or the Cross. Those are their own thing.
So you're saying Baja is on the list.
Baja's on the list. Baja, it edges out the ZDX because it's useful.
Yeah.
ZDX is less useful than the vehicle.
It's got a bit of performance. I think you can get a Baja XT, perhaps?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you could. I'm not sure if you could get a manual XT, but you could definitely get an XT.
I've been told that Subarus of that era, and maybe they still are like Legos. If you get the right part together, you can pretty much put it all together.
Speaking as someone who owns an LS swapped Jeep from the 80s, all cars are like Legos. Okay. It just depends how much time, frustration, and money you're willing to throw into the Lego pit and then set on fire.
I want to know more of this. So weird, they're cool now. Has the Aztec reached that yet? I saw a really fresh looking Aztec the other day, and it caught me off guard.
Every time I see an Aztec, I think about the weirdest quote that I ever heard about the project, which was that like it was an engineer who had worked on the design and execution of the Aztec, and he was talking to some colleague or a journalist, and he was really wistful, and he's like, with that vehicle, we managed to meet every single performance and engineering and design mandate we were given, and I was so proud of that. And it's like, every time I think of that, it's like the idea that this person operated in a total vacuum where like the context of the vehicle didn't matter as long as they did what they were told and designed what they were asked to design.
But I mean, that vehicle, I think, was ahead of its time by like 20 years, man. For sure. Like,
but it was not attractive to look at. I'm not saying it's as ugly as people say it is, but it's not attractive.
You also say that about the PT Cruiser.
I don't think anyone thinks the PT Cruiser was ugly.
I think the PT Cruiser is a wild looking vehicle. It's not a great looking vehicle. You can't
compare those two vehicles because the PT Cruiser was a huge sales success.
Yes, that's right.
And it was at a time where retro themed cars were what everyone was doing.
Right. What else is so weird? It's cool. Oof. There was another one on that list I was thinking of right now.
Anything from Citroën, like
the Lincoln. Sorry, what was that?
And anything from Citroën in the 80s, like the BX, is pretty cool.
I was thinking the Lincoln pickup trucks. What are they called? The Mark LT.
The Mark LT is the Mark LT is the one that's just the F-150.
Yes,
but the Blackwood is the one that had like the carpeted bed. And the non-removable,
that's the one. I want that.
The non-removable tonneau cover, and like instead of a tailgate, it had barn doors.
That's the one I want. I want that. If I see one, that's a wild pick.
I think it's pretty neat, but yeah,
it's so ridiculous. I love this interior.
The best part of the Blackwood is that it had no customer. Like
exactly,
there was no business case for that vehicle. They just
I'm looking
built
at this.
it.
bed, and I'm just like, huh?
Yeah, it's what are you gonna put in there? I guess if you, I don't know, like marbles or something. It's so strange. It's very strange. You can't put anything dirty in there because you can never clean it.
So obviously, I've been putting off talking about this.
Oh, one more
Okay.
vehicle. Ford Explorer Sport Track. How do you feel about that?
I think they're a little bit more. I think they're weird.
What about the Adrenaline model? An Adrenaline with no
Oh,
E.
yeah. So that's the one. You're right. That's a very specific model. You have to go for the Adrenaline.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the. To me, I used to see a lot of them. I feel.
Yeah, I shopped for one last year, and they're surprisingly expensive. But that might just be because all used cars were surprisingly expensive last year compared to now.
Yeah. But then when I started thinking of weird trucks is such a thing. Like what is the name of the Envoy XUV? Is that the name of that XUV product? So that makes no sense.
I've seen maybe 3 or 4 in my lifetime that's with the opening roof.
Yeah,
which is like my dad's.
That turns it into a pickup truck essentially.
My dad's Studebaker Wagoneer, wagon. His Lark Wagoneer has the same feature from the 60s. Yeah.
This is the wildest looking car.
And like all the ads for the Wagoneer from the era, they're great because they had to come up with like a reason for you to want this feature. And so the ads would have like the Studebaker parked beside a stream and like people are standing in the back and fishing out of it. Mm-hmm. Or they'd be like moving a refrigerator. And it's how many times can you move a refrigerator?
That's fair.
It's not something you want to do more than once in your lifetime.
But I will buy the most expensive product to help me with that one-time aspect. Any other weird cars? I'm going to say right now, because I was thinking of the GMC Envoy XUV.
I mean,
any GM era Saab.
Oh, I don't know. They're not so much weird as they are bland.
They're so weird. They're so out there. You don't see them.
Subaru Brat is another good weird one. With the plastic seats bolted in the bed so it could evade the chicken tax at import.
It's just a worse Baja, though.
I don't know if it's worse, more dangerous. It had the Cyclops eye, which was the extra headlight in the middle of the grill that had a cover, and you could like flip the headlight cover up and like flash people with the Cyclops eye. I think that's pretty neat.
I used to do this. Let's be clear to our listeners. Ben legitimately sends me photos of every VinFast he sees, which occurs about like once a week, I suppose.
Oh, if I'm lucky.
I used to do this to my old boss at Auto Guide.
I also
Jody.
send Sammy every FJ40 I see.
Yeah, because I love FJ40s. They're so sick. But you also send FJ Cruisers too.
Yeah, sorry, FJ Cruisers. That's what I meant. Excuse me.
There's a couple of cars I do this for as well to Jody. I used to send her any of the. What are those gold Infinities called?
Gold Infinities.
They used to have the special program for these Infinities. It was called. Well, I'm going to get back to it. Give me a second.
I'm unfamiliar with this. The only weird Infinity I can think of is that conversation from Three Kings where Ice Cube is arguing whether they made a convertible version of I think it's the J30. Do you remember that? The Spike Jonze movie?
Yes. Sorry, I don't. I don't recognize whatever you're just talking about. But I will tell you right now that the product I'm thinking of is the Neiman Marcus edition.
Oh.
And I loved seeing these. I think they're so cool. They're such a vibe that you have to. I take a picture of them all the time. Like, why? And great. Good for you for doing so.
So Neiman Marcus also released a special edition 007 Z8. Or not Z8,
really?
Sorry, Z3 when GoldenEye came out. When the first Pierce Brosnan version of James Bond came out. Here's the thing, though. They used in the movie. It was controversial because James Bond's driving German cars now. Yes. BMW was a big sponsor, so Neiman Marcus comes out with this car. But when a lot of people forget that when the Z3 first came to North America, it had a 1.9 liter 4-cylinder engine. You could not get the 6-cylinder engine for the first model year, and so all of the Neiman Marcus cars have like 130 horsepower or something.
Oh my god!
They're like it's really bad.
James Bond like underpowered.
Yeah, it is
engine.
One of the
worst. Is it not even turbocharged?
No, there was no turbocharging back then. BMW didn't have a single turbocharged car in the 90s. This is one of the worst configurations you can get for a Z3. It's really a car you want to experience with the 2.5 liter engine.
It's also not covered in gold like the Neiman Marcus.
No, but it came in the Neiman Marcus one came in like a blue. I think it was called, not Caribbean Blue, which is a Nenya song, but it was some island kind of blue, and it almost was a turquoise, I guess. Anyway, but that's what I think of that. Neiman Marcus.
Atlanta blue?
Atlanta blue? I don't know. It came out with a lot Atlantic blue.
Maybe.
They came out with a lot of special edition cars in that era because imagine, if you will, a world where people order a car from a catalog that they're also ordering linens and like cutlery and stuff.
I want to be that person one day. I want to be that person, or I want to be like I've told you, I want to be the person who buys a laptop in the vending machine in the airport.
Yeah, that's the modern equivalent of Neiman Marcus. I'm completely with you on that.
Like, oh, rats, I forgot my laptop at home.
Even headphones are kind of a stretch.
Buy $1,000 product in this machine here.
And like, imagine you're like a smash and grab person and you like smash it and then you realize you're in one of the world's most secure public areas with like intense levels of video surveillance.
Mm-hmm.
What were we talking about? ZDX?
Yeah, Acura ZDX, of course. And the product I drove was colored in this tiger eye pearl, which is kind of gold or orange or yellow.
Okay. You have to pay more for that?
It's important to talk about... yes, you definitely do.
Okay.
It's important to talk about this car because this is Acura's first electric vehicle, and it's also, I think, its most powerful car it's ever made.
What do you mean most powerful car it's ever made?
The product I had 500 horsepower and 544 pound-feet of torque.
Wait a minute. Also, let's backtrack on the first electric car they've ever had, because they've ever made, because they didn't make this.
No, they did. Yeah, so you want to backtrack on that?
Yeah. Who made this car, Sammy?
General Motors makes this. It's built alongside, as far as I understand, it's built alongside the Cadillac Lyric, which is in Spring Hill, Tennessee. Is that the right city?
So
is that the right state?
It's not built alongside the Blazer, like the Prologue. It's actually on a larger version of the platform?
No, it's the same platform. They have the same wheelbase. This car is a little bit longer in length, but it has the same wheelbase. It uses a different battery than the Prologue and Blazer. It uses the same 102 kilowatt hour battery as the Cadillac Lyric.
Okay.
So like this is it. Like the Prologue, Honda decided that they are going to make EVs and they were late to the game and they got to make a partner with somebody. And they chose GM, which I actually don't think is the worst decision that, you can make in the world of EVs. They could have gone with Toyota and Subaru, for example.
Yeah,
or that would have been a disaster.
They could have gone with like Geely, though, or someone like that.
Yeah, maybe. And they have, I guess in other markets.
I guess what I'm saying is they could have gone with someone who doesn't have a North American market presence.
Right. That's a good point.
Although maybe with the tariffs that are on batteries now for if you want to have a vehicle, if you want to have the rebates, access to federal rebates in the United States, you have to have batteries and electrical systems that are manufactured in North America.
And my understanding is because the ZDX is completely built in North America, it gets all the great rebates.
Yeah, the same as with the Prologue. So a vehicle we talked about, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, Sami sent me a link to something saying that that's the cheapest vehicle in Honda's showroom to lease. It's even cheaper than like a base Civic.
Yeah.
So a lot of that cost deferment is because they have access to these rebates and they're being very aggressive about it.
And the ZDX as well is about $500 per month for a lease as well, which I think is pretty...
That's in the U.S., right?
That's in the U.S. So I think some people will find that somewhat attractive.
I'm going to find out what it is in Canada. I'm curious to see the delta there.
But we are this is the highlight, right? Like this is the headline of the story, which is this is an Acura that is an Acura only in name and maybe design. It doesn't look like, at least it doesn't look like a GM product, but it just doesn't really look or feel like an Acura in any way. But it could be worse. Like I said, it could have been significantly worse than what we got here, because what we do have is a vehicle with 500 horsepower. We have a vehicle that's capable of pretty fast or pretty high fast recharge speeds of up to 190 kilowatt, which is pretty good.
So the Canadian model, if you're curious, the lease starts at $1,300.
Jesus.
Yeah. And did you drive an A-Spec or a Type S?
Yes, I was going to point this out. In Canada, there are only 2 trim levels. There's an A-Spec and there's a Type S.
The Type S is $1,350.
I drove the Type S.
Okay.
Which is available in rear-wheel drive and all-wheel drive. And my model goes about 300 miles on a charge, which is good enough.
This is strange. I'm building the Acura right now,
Mhm.
and it comes with a 4-year, 80,000 kilometer warranty. So that's 50,000 miles. If you want to add another year of warranty, it's $4,000.
That's a lot.
And then if you want to add 2 more years of warranty, it's $4,400.
Okay.
6 years of warranty, $5,400. So it kind of feels like once you get past that first warranty period,
Just
1 year is like
yeah.
$500. You can get an 8-year warranty or 130,000 kilometers, which is about 75,000 miles for $6,000. That seems like a lot of money for an
It is
electric
a lot of
vehicle.
money. But let's point out a couple of things here. As we mentioned, it is based on GM's Ultium technology. It's seemingly built alongside the Cadillac Lyriq. I haven't seen the line. I don't know what it's like. They might not be on the same line. They might have different people. I don't know, something like that. But we had significant issues with the Lyriq that we tested
Yes.
in terms of build quality.
Huge problems. I mean,
And
huge
so
problems in
maybe-
the sense that there were many problems that were annoying.
There were small problems.
It took away from the experience of the vehicle.
There were small problems, but many of them.
Yeah.
And we've also heard that Ultium-based vehicles like the Blazer have encountered a few software issues in their rollout. So maybe, springing for that 1 year, maybe that 1 year warranty or that 2 year warranty might be extended warranty might be warranted.
Maybe. I mean, assuming you want to keep the vehicle that long.
That's right. I'm going to reiterate, though, that you're building the vehicle. This is available in 3 different configurations. There's a rear-wheel drive single motor model, which has 358 horsepower and delivers 313 miles of range. There's also a all-wheel drive model that has 490 horsepower, as well as a all-wheel drive model, the Type S, that has 500 horsepower. All have a 102 kilowatt hour battery, which is huge. Like, that's a massive battery. And I think this is like the point of diminishing returns. The difference between the all-wheel drive and rear-wheel drive model is over 100 horsepower for the rear-wheel drive to all-wheel drive, but 9 miles of range is the difference between them.
Yeah, that's actually impressive that the all-wheel drive one is so close.
I don't know. Maybe it's so like. I think a rear-wheel drive model should be a little bit more efficient with 100 kilowatt hours of.
Maybe though that it's the all-wheel drive one that's super efficient. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, maybe.
And that they're keeping the rear-wheel drive one at the point that it is because it helps keep costs low for the entry level. That's just a guess.
That's possible. That's definitely possible. And then I will say, like, the most accurateness of this vehicle is in terms of its exterior design. It looks like an RDX.
It does.
I think that's about it. That's the biggest thing. Like I said, I had the Type S, which starts at 73,000. I had the extra performance package, which includes like different tires, I believe. And I had the extra cost Tiger Eye Pearl paint job, which was an extra $600. And that's, like, as far as I understand, that's all the packages available.
So that's about a $90,000 vehicle in Canada.
In Canada, yeah, it's quite expensive in Canada. In the US, it is 76,000, I believe.
Which is actually more expensive if you do the exchange.
Yeah.
So the Canadians are getting a deal on this vehicle because
Let me double check to make sure that there's no
76,000 US
rebates
is
on this.
102,000 Canadian at current exchange rates.
I just want to double check to see if there's no, like, sometimes they apply the rebates to.
Yeah, the vehicle I'm looking at in Canada has a $3,500 customer incentive added to it, but it doesn't have any of the specific. I believe this vehicle is too expensive to qualify for a provincial rebate. I'm not sure exactly where the line is for vehicles right now because where I live, they're about to phase out a lot of the provincial level rebate, which I think is around 7,500 or 8,000. It's quite a lot. Is going to disappear in 2025. So,
I think it's really important to talk about these pricing points. As I mentioned, a fully loaded version of this car is about $76,000. I believe you can spend less than that or around that much on a Cadillac Lyriq.
I think you're right. I think it
So-
starts at 60.
what are we doing here is the question, right?
Well, I mean, if
you
Acuras are built better than the Lyrics, the choice is obvious, right?
So my experience suggests that I didn't have any sort of issues with the interior. I didn't hear any rattles or squeaks, except for maybe the seatbelt adjustment, the seatbelt height adjustment.
Yes.
Sometimes that's like squeaky, I suppose is the only word I would use for it.
It
like
can
you
be.
hear that. I think a lot of cars have that kind of issue. This one definitely did. And that was the only thing I heard. The interior is definitely not impressive. It's not, to me, the Cadillac has a really gorgeous interior. I think you get like 30 inches of screen space, and they really use it with like fancy animations, and they have nice trim. This Acura does not have anything special going on at all. It has two 11-inch screens, one for the infotainment system, which is built on Android Automotive OS. It also features wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. It worked pretty fine. It has the same issues that I had with the Prologue, which is like accessibility of what features I think are essential. Is some of them are through the screen, are a bit convoluted.
Yeah.
So
and that's increasingly the case with these vehicles.
So like lights, you have to turn on and off the lights through the screen.
I think that the new Chevy midsize pickups are like that too.
Yeah, I think so. And then the regenerative braking, there's a paddle on the steering wheel that applies full regen, or you can like tap this really small button on the screen that's always there that will adjust the regen as well.
There's a constantly appearing button on the screen?
Yeah, it's like a tiny little circle.
Oh,
you
wow.
Just like tap that. And then finally, one of the other things that really like highlights that this is not an Acura product is that it has multiple drive modes. If you recall, me and you have talked about the way Acura displays its drive modes in other vehicles. Like the RDX puts the drive mode selector right in the middle of the console. It's a big knob. It can easily be mistaken for the volume knob.
Well, that's because Acura's console for a while had many big knobs on it that were like really close together. And not only that, I think they were like vertically in line with each other.
Anyways, the drive select, the drive mode select is actually like hidden by a bank of buttons on near your left knee. So you would never to me, it took me like a day to realize like I've been driving it in sport mode and losing range a little bit quicker than I was expecting.
Left knee
and
buttons are my least favorite buttons in any car because exactly what you just said, they're easy to miss. And they're hard to use because you have to, by definition, look way away from the road, down and away to use them. So I feel like for stuff, usually you see lights there, which is okay as long as there's not too much functionality. But you're starting to see drive modes. I don't like when you have things like stability control down there. I think maybe you should put the trunk release there, and that's about it. You know, like something that I'm never going to be using while I'm driving. Yeah,
exactly. So, like, to me, these are like little things that make me feel like this is not an Acura. This is not designed to be like an Acura. It's just adopted GM's kind of like hard points for buttons and features, and they've done what they could. This is really evident because there's one feature on this vehicle that is not on any other Acura. I'm going to make sure the name is correct because it's not technically. It has Super Cruise. I mean, technically it has Super Cruise.
What is it called?
It's called Honda.
Honda?
Hold on. It's called, let me make sure. Yeah, Honda. Sorry, it's not called Honda. Oh, it's got a name. It's got a good name. It's called Hands-Free Cruise. That's it.
That's totally memorable.
It's part of Acura Watch 360 Plus. Hands-Free Cruise. That's what it's called. The button is identical to the button you would see on any GM product with Super Cruise. The light bar on the steering wheel is exactly the same as any other one that you'd see there. And it must use the same data, the same maps data that's powering that system.
Yeah, I mean, they're not going to create an entirely third-party system to integrate into a vehicle that, I mean, this gets me to another point. How long will Acura be building the ZDX based on this platform? Are you going to buy this vehicle now, and in 2028, when the second generation comes along and Honda maybe has its own internally developed battery electric vehicle platform, it's going to completely orphan this car? Like,
it's possible for sure.
What is parts availability going to be like?
Already the car is already orphaned, right? Like, will you really feel? We've talked about this with the Toyota twins and the BMW. What's it called? Z4 and Supra. Will you feel comfortable taking this car to an Acura dealer to get some software sorted out, for example?
I feel like at least in the BMW, sorry, when we're talking about Toyota and Subaru, where there's the Solterra and the BZ4X.
Oh yeah, right.
And then there's
I don't know who makes that car, to be honest.
The BRZ and the FRS or the GT86. In that relationship, Subaru is clearly the junior partner, right? And they are getting a product that they could not make on their own. In an cost-effective way, and Toyota calls the shots. But when you're talking about Honda is a really large company. So they're not the junior partner with GM. This is, I believe, a legitimate technology sharing agreement. Okay. So I could see Honda I don't see Subaru coming up with a homegrown EV platform, but I could see Honda doing it.
Well, I think they will eventually. I mean, from what I understand, they showed something at Pebble Beach where they're going to start making.
Didn't they show a concept car from the 80s at Pebble Beach?
Yeah, they did that too. I love that.
Okay.
But to maybe remind people that they can make their own cars? I don't know.
If we want to.
But if we wanted to, and we didn't at the time, but now we do.
Thank you for asking.
Apparently, they really believe that they're going to make their own EV in the near future. I think by 2026, which
XDX.
Yeah,
they'll call it Cross DX though.
They got to bring back another nameplate. I think they should just bring back the
what's
CL
left? Vigor. They're going to go with
Vigor, Legend or Vigor,
Legend or Vigor. Those are the only two I think that anyone remembers. Yeah, but I mean, they don't have an RLX anymore. Do they have an RLX now? No, it's gone, right?
No, it's gone.
So yeah, okay.
But I should point out, there's a lot of things here that are questionable that I don't understand the decisions, right? But it is a fine product. It does not feel like an Acura. When I get into an Acura, I think especially their most successful products, especially recently. Let's say the Acura Integra Type S, which is one of the most, critically acclaimed hot hatches on the market.
Or even just the regular Integra, which I think is still a good vehicle.
Which is pretty good, right? Which is basically a really good Civic Si and a Civic Type R. This doesn't feel enjoyable to drive at all. Even if it has 500 horsepower, it weighs over 6,000 pounds. It does not seem particularly quick off the line. Car Driver has logged at 4.5 seconds or 4.3 seconds, which is...
How is that not quick? In what universe is that not quick?
Relatively speaking, it's not quick because there are BMWs and Genesis models that do that sprint in less time.
Okay.
In under 4 seconds, which is crazy. Okay. Right?
All right.
And it doesn't feel as brutal as other EVs, especially ones that are targeting that performance and premium.
But is that what you want? Do you want something brutal?
I don't know. This is the point. You put the Type S badge on a vehicle,
and you expect brutality.
It's got to be interesting to drive in some way or another.
Okay, no, but I feel like interesting and brutal are two different things. It's
got to catch your attention when you're driving.
All right.
And this is not doing it. It just feels like it feels like a Cadillac. And if you've driven a Cadillac,
I drove one yesterday.
Even a non-electric Cadillac, one of the non-V models. They're fine. They're really soft. They're comfortable. They get the job done. They can get you in and out of traffic really easily. The highlights of this vehicle is it's got lots of range. It charges at a high charge speed. I will point out though, it's not a particularly fast car to charge because it has such a big battery. That means that I think it takes about 10 hours to charge on a level 2 charger, which I think is kind of long.
Well, that's fine if you're doing it overnight though.
Hey man, sometimes nighttime is only 8 hours.
Okay. Thank you for your planetary musings on the planetary dance of our solar system.
But the DC fast charging speeds, like I said, it peaks at 190. It'll take just over 40 minutes to go from 20 to 80%, which I think is a different.
That is quite long.
That is a long time.
What did you see?
I haven't used a DC fast charger, but I looked up online to look at some charging curves that people have experienced online. And I saw that people were getting pretty good charge speeds below 20, which is good. But after 80, it tanks. It tanks hard. It goes under 50.
Yeah, and but that's still pretty good for over 80.
And then it goes down to under 10.
Wait till I
after,
tell you about the
90.
charging speeds I experience on my vehicle.
Okay. So what I'm trying to say is you've got a pretty good EV, but if you want all of this stuff, wouldn't you also be cross-shopping a Cadillac as well? And the Cadillac has a slightly better interior, in my opinion. It has a more impressive looking design. I think it has more range, and it's built by the company that designed it. You know?
Yeah, that is a plus. I mean, if you're shopping at that price point for an electric vehicle too, I think you might also be looking at the iX.
Yeah, I think the iX is pretty cool.
But it is a lot more expensive. I mean, not a lot more. It starts at 87. More. So it's 10 grand more without any options. They are pretty well equipped, but still. So I think that from what you're describing, an iX would be a true luxury experience compared to what you're getting. And if you were spending, I mean, if you're going to spend $76,000 and not get an all that luxurious experience, it might be worth stretching it to 87.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's a few EV companies that are doing EVs really well. You've mentioned BMW. I agree with that. I think Porsche and Audi have some pretty good EVs. And I do think GM is, like I said, they could have picked a worse partner to partner with. I think GM does EVs fairly well, just when the software is and build quality is up to snuff. And this Acura, I had no major issues with it so far, and that's it. Right. The big thing that I want to reiterate, though, this Type S had Super Cruise, which is always a wonderful feature to use.
It's great. It's really great.
More cars should have this.
Maybe more GM cars should have it, because remember from my towing story last week, I did not have it.
$100,000 2500,
and it did not have it.
And it didn't have it. And I had an Acura.
Didn't even have lane keeping.
Oh my God.
Not with towing on.
So, really lukewarm response. For an Acura EV, it's obviously a pretty good first go because it's essentially a well-established product right now, right? But with a different badge.
So does that wrap up your thoughts?
I think so, yeah. But you also drove an EV, one that we've had some experience in the past, but not at this trim level. So give me the scoop here.
So I drove a 2024 BMW i7 xDrive, but it was the M70 model, Sammy. And
the next 100?
No, not the next one. Not the next.
Is there a next 100? Next 200?
So for longtime listeners might recall, about a year and a half ago, a year and a half ago, there was a big ice storm in Montreal where I was still living at the time. And I had an i7, and I ended up spending like 2 days living in the i7 because I had a full battery and it had that giant screen and an internet connection. And the fold down screen from the roof. And I could just sit in the back of the i7, stay warm, do my work, feel comfortable. And I could drive it to parts of the city that still had electricity and plug it into level 2 chargers and top it up. So it was actually the perfect vehicle for my circumstances. But BMW has come out with a more powerful version of the i70 for some reason. You'll recall that BMW has not ever made an M7. They've never made, you know how Mercedes has the S65 and the S63, and there's been an S8 from Audi. But BMW never went that way. They always kind of held back. They made 12-cylinder versions of the car. They made very powerful twin-turbo V8s, but they never made a full-on M version. So this car is kind of, I think, what we're going to see as the apex of performance for their full-size EV sedan platform.
Okay.
The biggest difference is it still has the same front motor that the other version of the i7 has, which I believe is M60, M50. I can't remember off the top of my head. In any case, it's the one that shares with the i5 M60. It's a 255 horsepower, but they made a special M-tuned version of the rear motor that has 483 horsepower. That is the most grunt they've put in any electric motor to date. Like, period,
really?
On any vehicle. Yes. And together, it's the maximum output is 650 horsepower and 749 pound-feet of torque. If you use a boost button, there's a boost button that that's without the boost button. There is a boost button that adds extra torque to 811 pound-feet for like 10 seconds.
What am I supposed to do with that kind of?
I don't know, because I barely used it because it's terrifying. Like, I don't know. This vehicle also weighs the same as your ZDX, is 6,000 pounds, like just over 6,000 pounds. In perspective, so yeah, the previous model is the M760 Li. That's the other i7. It had 50 less horsepower and 122 less pound-feet of torque, even without the boost button engaged. So it's quite a difference. It's not an insane difference, but that's like, I don't know, 20% more torque, which is not nothing.
No, I mean, it's not nothing. That's great.
Yeah.
I think tons of torque, like any percentage increase that's over 10 or even 15
So
at this level is worth mentioning. You know?
the official time 0 to 60, 0 to 100 for our Canadian listeners is 3.5 seconds. In reality, a lot of the BMW EVs are like several tenths quicker, so we're probably looking at just over 3 seconds. So a 3-ton vehicle hitting 60 miles an hour in just over 3 seconds is mind-blowing.
Yeah.
BMW has made a few other changes to this vehicle to try and it's not a full M model, right? So it doesn't have the same type of focus suspension that you would find on an M car, but it does have, they stiffened the chassis by actually adding material to the front end to make it more rigid. It's got electronically controlled shocks and air springs, and those are tuned by M. It has rear axle steering, 2.5 degrees, which I appreciated in my driveway. Right now, my driveway is very tight because I have a trailer, a bunch of cars, and getting in and out requires a lot of maneuvering. The i7 was way easier to get in and out than that giant pickup truck that I had the week before, which I appreciate, even though they're maybe the same length. It has active roll stabilization, so when you hit the corners, I guess it's the sway bars that are moving to kind of, or the suspension itself to kind of keep things flat. All of that to say, it is still not a driver's car. Okay. It's a car that is pleasant to drive. I took this car on a trip to the state fair, or not the state fair, but the largest fair in Vermont, in Essex Junction, which is just outside of Burlington. It's called the Champlain Valley Expo, and it's about
the largest fair in the state. That should make it. That should automatically make it.
You know what, Sammy? Bigger is not always better, and
it should be.
This is a conversation for another day. It's about a 90-minute drive through country roads, and I really enjoy driving the i7. I didn't feel like I wanted to really push it hard. It's not a car that's engaging because it's so heavy. Okay. Even when it's in sport mode, it's very, very quick. The extra power is apparent. On the highway, it was terrifyingly fast. Like there were a couple of times where I was passing somebody and I hit like 85, 90 miles an hour, just breathing on the throttle, or not the throttle, but the accelerator. And you don't realize it because the car being so large and so much mass is it really insulates you from the sensation of speed. So you have to pay attention to the speedometer. It kind of resets your internal G meter as to how quick you're actually going. I like the car quite a bit, but I like the regular i7 just as much. And this is very expensive. I mean, in Canada, it starts at $185,000. I had a couple of packages that pushed it to $222,000. And those packages included a rear comfort package, which I believe much of that is standard on the American model. I had a specific BMW individual color, purple. It was so dark, it almost looked black. And it had a Grand Lusso interior, which is also expensive. In the US, building this vehicle, you're looking at, I had the number up here, but it's I think it starts at 168,000 if I'm not mistaken, 169,000. And obviously you can probably push it to just under 190 or around 200 if you add on many of the additional options that are available. Right. Especially if it's individual stuff. Like the rear seat of this car is a real treat. It has, inside the door inserts, I guess the door panels, you have a little touch controller so that from the rear seat you can control infotainment, multimedia, all that stuff. The materials are top notch. The car really feels like it's worth the money you're paying, just in the sense that it's elevated above less expensive BMWs. There is a differentiation. Yeah. But if I'm going to be honest, I mean, from the outside, I'm not a big fan of the M flare that's been added to it. A lot of stuff's blacked out. There's some extra lighting around the grille, tons of badges. You got side skirts and stuff. I think the car looks classier in the non M70 version.
Okay.
And I also think it's just a way better value. You know, in a world where we talk about value for these kinds of cars, I
think a $100,000 vehicle needs to be the best at what it can be.
Well, the i7 starts at 105. So you're looking at another 60 grand for the additional power and ostensibly the handling that you will never use.
But you just want to make sure that that additional price will not ruin the car or make the car worse in any way. I don't think the styling gets worse, but it is a bit. You can see that side skirt. You know what I mean? It looks a little like out of place.
Yeah.
I want to talk to you about this cabin though.
Okay.
This is the wildest looking cabin I've seen in a while. I really actually appreciate that they've made an effort in making the cabin feel like
it's Swarovski crystals everywhere, Sammy. You know how we talk a lot about the shift knob and the iDrive controller, but for this vehicle you just have the little shift. It's like the kind of like the tab that you push forward and backwards. You still have the Swarovski iDrive knob, but you also have on the door panels the controllers for the seats, like seat position, are Swarovski, and they catch the light and blind you all the time, and it is a problem.
Does it still, really?
Yes.
In the photos I'm looking at, it looks so pretty. It looks so...
it's nice. The interior is quite, like I said, it really does separate itself from, like, say, an i5, which is a car I like a lot. But when you get into the i7, especially this M70, you realize you've spent the extra money.
Okay, can you tell me what's going on with the trim that separates the upper and lower dash? Like,
it's kind of like a metal, like a meshed metal that feels very solid when you touch it. If you look on the inside, I was talking about those touch screens inside the door panels. In the back seat, you kind of have more of the same, and it like surrounds that screen. It's very extroverted, but I think it looks good.
And there is this ambient lighting bar? Like, what is going on here?
There's lots of ambient lighting.
So colorful. It looks like a gaming PC at times.
If you put that, speaking of gaming PCs, if you put the hazard lights on, it flashes the interior ambient lights too.
Oh my God. Tell me, you know that I love this. Like, it's so slick. It's so cool.
I mean,
the way that it kind of like blends into the angles of this like Swarovski design or whatever, it looks sharp, man. They really did pull it off. The only thing that I'm worried about now is, look, there's an arms race with these screens. The Mercedes EQS and the EQS AMG has basically an entire screen for a dashboard.
Yeah, we don't have that in this car.
And when we compare to what you've got in the i7, which looks a little small in comparison. I don't know if somebody will ever cross-drop the two. I think they might.
I think that it's an advantage for BMW, to be honest.
Yeah, that it looks a little bit more focused.
It doesn't look bad when the car is off. There's a couple things that are maybe a little too cute. And for the i7, if you're controlling the position of the heat vents, the heating and cooling vents, and whether they're open or not, it's like there's a slider that's touch sensitive for open and close, but underneath the dash, there's a weird little toggle you have to move around that controls multiple vents at the same time. There's like one for the driver, one for the passenger. It's not easy to, while you're driving, it's not easy to use. Okay. You're like fumbling around under the dash. You can't really see what your hands are touching, and it's a little frustrating.
That doesn't sound great. Okay.
No.
But on the other hand, like I keep thinking sometimes like 7 Series and i7s might be about the rear seat experience.
Oh, for sure.
And this also still looks beautiful.
Look, both experiences, front and back, are good in this car. And as a further liking it more than the EQS, from the exterior, it doesn't look like a jelly bean. It doesn't
look dumb. Yeah, that's right.
It's in your face with its design. You either like it or you hate it, but it at least makes you feel something. With the EQS and pretty much the entire line of EQ cars, the wind tunnel made almost all of the styling decisions, and that's unfortunate.
The final question I have is, again, about controls in the cabin. It does look like there's a lot of like these piano black touch sensitive controls.
I'm not a huge fan.
Did they get like gross?
They didn't get gross, but the ones on the center console, you really have to, like, around the iDrive controller, you really have to push them to figure out if you've actually pushed them.
Yeah. Jaguars and I think Land Rovers and Range Rovers are like that too. You need to like press hard.
I don't
which
like
is okay.
that. No, I'm not a big fan, especially if I'm wearing gloves and stuff and I don't have the same kind of haptic feedback through the fabric that I'm wearing. I mean, this is obviously a very Canadian complaint to make, but in cold weather, your hands are not often bare inside a car, at least not during your initial driving. I know you like to peel those gloves off as soon as you can, Sammy.
I do, yes.
Yeah.
I also appreciate the heated steering wheels for stuff like that.
Yeah.
And sometimes these ones have heated armrests.
Yes,
right?
heated armrests on both sides in this car. And
Wicked.
I will say the car was quite good at detecting the exterior temperature and making the adjustment on start to let you to like either warm you up or put on the cooled seats depending on, and we're at that time of year where it's very warm in the day and then it cools off a lot at night, so you're switching back and forth between these kinds of controls. There is a problem that I have with the car though, and this is not just a problem with the i7, but as I discovered, it's an issue with multiple i versions or even some of the plug-in hybrids that BMW is selling, and that has to do with charging speeds.
What's wrong with the charging speeds? Do these things they're not fast chargers? What's the story?
When I use the fast charger on this vehicle, and let me start off with the initial problem. I brought this vehicle home, plugged it into my level 2 charger. I didn't drive it for the next day. I didn't have anywhere to go because in the country, sometimes that's what happens. And it charged up. I was probably at 75, 80%. It was at 100 when I got back into it. I didn't think anything of it. I did a little bit of driving. I came back home. The car was about 82%, 81%. I plugged it in. The next day, I get in the car and it gives me an error saying that there was fluctuation of voltage and it stopped charging. And I'm like, that's strange, because I looked at my app and it had been charging for 12 hours or something like that. I'm not sure whether that was a problem with my charger or whether it was a problem with the fact that the car was only pulling 1.5 kilowatts out of the wall. Now, my charger, normally it's, 7 kilowatts, 9 kilowatts, but within that range, right? 7.6 is usually where it sits. That's not great when you have a gigantic battery like this one. I can't remember the exact size. I know it's over 100. I want to say 102 kilowatt hours. Let me double check on that.
I think you're right.
Trying to find it.
101.7.
101.7. Okay. So I was a little bit worried. I thought maybe I was having a charger problem because no matter what I did with the car or with the charger, I reset it. I did a factory reset, or not a factory reset, but I did a power cycle, and then I did an internal reset. It was still only pulling 1.5 kilowatts. So I went into town. There's a good 100 kilowatt fast charger. I plug it into that. It pulls up to 80 and it charges. And I'm like, okay, there's obviously not a problem with the car. But then I started looking online while I was at this fast charger to pass the time, figuring out, am I the only one who has this problem? Is there a setting I'm missing? All these people online are complaining that when they move locations with their car, it resets the charge limit to the car to 6 amps, which is the lowest possible limit. To give you perspective, my charger is at 48 amps. So that's 1/8 the difference, right? That's a pretty big difference. And it lines up with 1.5 kilowatts roughly. So I look on the cars. I didn't think to do this because I've never had a press car that had a charge limit set. I checked the BMW, the charge limit is set to 6 amps. I'm like, this is terrible. I change it while I'm waiting. It doesn't affect DC fast charging. It's only when you're on AC charging on a level 2. Right. So I charge up to 70%. I get home, I plug it in, and it's pulling 1.5 kilowatt. And I'm like, what is going on? I look on the screen again. It has reset itself to 6 amp limit. I've literally driven 5 minutes away to my place. Yeah. I check online again, and it depends. The bug seems to be some people, if they have location-specific charging, which is the car checks the GPS, and I guess based on your charging experience at that location, it will set a charge limit related to that. Or some people turn that off and get the problem fixed. Some people have to turn it on to get the problem fixed. It's not clear, but for the rest of my time with the car, every time I parked somewhere, I had to reset the charge limit back up to 48 instead of having it set at 6. Even when I had the charge limit turned off completely, it would reset itself. That's not a great software bug. I mean, obviously, no software bug is good if it interferes with the ownership experience, but this is something that can catch you off guard, whereas if you leave something charging and go away and come back 10 hours later, the difference between 1.5 kilowatts and 7.6 kilowatts is enormous.
It's huge.
You could be stranded, I guess is what massive. I'm saying. So I've never had this happen on a BMW before. I guess I got lucky. I wasn't happy with that part of the i7.
Did you like resolve it?
No, there's no resolution that I can tell. If there is a resolution, I was unable to fix it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's a big letdown.
It is, but I mean, again,
unfixable issues are problems.
It's something that has ostensibly been a problem with other vehicles as well, other BMWs, and I didn't run into it with them. So, I don't know how prevalent it really is.
Okay, that's fair. Anything else you want to talk about this week?
No, that wraps it up for me.
We had a great episode this week. I love this.
Every episode is a great episode.
But I mean, just
every episode you can walk away from is a great episode.
That's fair.
You can walk away still friends.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Well, the podcast would change dramatically if we're not friends.
There would be a lot more animosity. And
the intro would be totally different.
Of course.
If you want to listen to more of our podcast, I recommend you. While we're still friends, I recommend you head on over to our website, unnamedautomotivepodcast.com, and check out all of our previous episodes, as well as photos and links to the stories that we've written about the vehicles that we're talking about. Additionally, you can subscribe to our podcast using a variety of buttons on the top of that webpage, or you can just find us in your favorite podcast client. That it could be Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or Spotify or even YouTube.
Google Podcasts exists anymore. I think
that's right.
YouTube now.
It's YouTube Music. While you're over at our website, you can also find a way to get in touch with us. We have a contact form. You fill that out and it lands in our inbox. But if you don't want to go through that, rigmarole, you can email us the old-fashioned way. The address is benjamin@benjaminhunting.com. And then there's also a way to get in touch with us on social media. You can reach out to us on Instagram. I'm at Sammy_ha, like you're laughing, HA. Or you can reach Ben. He's at Hunting Benjamin.
Sammy, what are you going to be talking about next week?
I really don't know. I think I had something, but now I don't know what it is anymore. Why don't you tell me what you're...
That's very confident. That's the kind of thing that brings people back for next week's episode.
That's right. Oh, I've got a car that's under embargo.
Oh, okay. Can you tell us what the car is?
I don't know. Yeah, why not? It's a Honda Civic hybrid.
Okay.
And a Civic Si, I believe.
All right. I'm going to be talking about the Subaru BRZ TS.
That's exciting. I love that car. Wow. Okay.
All right.
Perfect.
Thank you for listening, everybody.
See ya.